Hello there. Welcome to another episode of The Healthy Enterprise. My guest today is Bill Wittmeyer. Bill has a Bachelor of Science and an MBA. He has been in charge of the strategic and operational direction of a pioneering and chemical vapor analysis company called Electronic Sensors, Inc., in which he is the CEO. He is also the co-founder and CEO of another deeply personal company called Maggie's Breath that is focused on using breath analysis to deliver diagnostically actionable information on detecting breast cancer. Very important conversation, and I look forward to hearing it. So let's get started. So, Bill, thank you. Welcome to the Healthy Enterprise and for agreeing to be on this episode with me. I'm looking forward to hearing about you, about Maggie's Breath. And so why don't you take us back a little bit and tell everybody about who you are and a bit about your journey and about the company.
Okay, well, let me start off to begin with. Since you're up there on Vancouver, I'm going to let everybody know I was born in Calgary. Unlike most people, I had enough sense to move south when I discovered these things called warm winters.
Bill, I was born in Calgary. We didn't have that conversation yet. So we were both born in Calgary.
Right. But you didn't move down where there's warm winters.
No, I did not. What was I thinking? I went lateral.
You went lateral. But it's also got a little bit warmer.
Yes, indeed.
So get a little background along here. So moved down to the States, went to school in the US, got my MBA from Columbia and got involved in early stage companies. And since then, I've been involved in early stage companies. What brought me to Maggie's Breath is actually a friend of hers called her up from Kuala Lumpur and said, "Hey, I'm just naming you on the board of a company I just invested in," to which she just said, "Azmi, that's 400 miles away." We were living in San Francisco at the time. And his response was, "It's closer than Kuala Lumpur." She had to agree. So we came down and we got involved in the company. And what we found is we had a very interesting technology, but we didn't necessarily have a business. And so we got started in trying to figure out what was the business and how do we do it. And one of the things that we discovered is we make a high-speed gas chromatography instrument that has sensitivities down to parts per billion. And by high speed, I mean we can run a test in 1 minute. That brings up a lot of interesting uses, but then the question becomes, where is this capability both deep and wide? And in our investigation, we found that that actually was in the field of healthcare. There were some doctors doing work associated with looking at children with cystic fibrosis and identifying a Pseudomonas infection. There was Ruth McInerney in London looking at tuberculosis and being able to identify markers associated with tuberculosis in the breath. And we had Michael Phillips over at Mensana Research who'd done some work associated with detecting various types of cancers, lung cancer and others, that all indicated that there is an interesting opportunity. So what we did is we pivoted the company to become focused on healthcare. And in particular, we spun out an operation that we called Pulmostics. Now, tragically and ironically, during this development, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she died from the disease. So I renamed the company Maggie's Breath. Maggie in her honor, and Breath, recognizing the technology we're using to screen for the various types of cancers. And at present, we are focused on screening for breast cancer. So what are we doing? And we've got a rapid high-speed instrument. We can analyze the breath in a minute, and this leaves us the opportunity to be a point-of-care screening tool for breast cancer. From a patient's perspective, as my wife said, everyone needs to get a mammogram. Every woman hates a mammogram.
Right.
If testicular cancer were found the same way that breast cancer was found, you men would have invented a painless solution for it by now.
She's right about that.
So that is exactly what we are doing. We're in the process of validating that we can screen for breast cancer. Early studies indicate we have approximately the same sensitivity and specificity as a mammogram.
Is that
Now,
right?
a mammogram has a variability. It depends upon the type of equipment you have, the skill of the radiologist, how much AI is built into your pattern tracing and your contrast tracing solutions along there. But they range anywhere from, if you've got a lousy radiologist and poor equipment, you'll be about a 70% sensitivity to
Hmm.
about 85% sensitivity.
Hmm.
Well, we fit right in about 80%.
Is that right?
So now the question is, why is this important? What do we do with it? Well, one of the big problems with breast cancer today is it is moving down age. It used to be a
Hmm.
postmenopausal disease.
Right.
Now it's occurring in women that are premenopausal. One of my young dear friends is a young woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer at 27, stage 3.
Wow.
And the poor girl, had to have bilateral radical mastectomies and go through all the treatment and everything else and go through this. And to a large extent, that youthful, vibrant girl became a reasonably depressed woman for a while as
Hmm.
all of this goes along. So, but if you were looking at what the regulatory authorities, whether it be Health Canada, the US FDA, the Britain, anywhere else, they're all looking and saying, unless there are otherwise existing conditions, we do not recommend mammograms on women before age 40 or 45. Well, in one state in Mexico, in Sinaloa, 1/3 of all new breast cancer cases are occurring in women under age 40.
Right.
That used to be 6%. So we need to get a solution that can screen for these women that is non-invasive, because the alternative of using radiation is, if we can screen these women, we're going to induce cancers in a certain percentage of those women from this screening mammogram.
Why is that limit in place? I mean,
Because
just traditionally.
the FDA recognizes that if I go and screen women, I'm inducing ionizing radiation.
Oh,
Ionizing radiation can create mutations in the cell's genes,
okay.
which can create the cancers.
Right. So
So
it's
we
risk
want to
management.
eliminate that.
Right.
Now, some of the other stuff that we're finding out now, as all men, we don't really know too much about this, but it turns out that breast tissue is not necessarily of uniform density.
Hmm.
And there are women who have dense breast tissues. With a mammogram, that's not very good at detecting breast cancer in women with dense breast tissues.
Oh, is that right?
The US FDA has recently gone out on notice and told radiologists that they are supposed to notify women that they have dense breast tissue, so that they may, if they choose, find an alternative screening technology, whether it be ultrasound or some other device that does that to screen for breast cancer, because a mammogram isn't going to be that accurate.
Hmm.
Well, we believe that we complement that, because we are not looking at tissue density.
Right.
We are looking at metabolic compounds that are generated by abnormal breast tissue.
Hmm.
And therefore, we think that we are a complementary test for that. We don't expect that we will be the primary screening tool for a long time, because there is not enough data out there.
Right.
But one of the more interesting things long term is we get a lot of information from volatile compounds that our bodies produce. Most of it is no longer taught to physicians. Years ago, they used to teach doctors that, oh, if your patient smells like fresh baked bread, you might think the patient has typhus.
Really?
Use all of your senses. Well, we've gone to using all sorts of laboratory tests, and we tend to ignore these.
Right.
Now, and wandering off base a little bit, what we're doing with analysis is we're taking these volatile organic compounds that your body produces, and that we're able to identify what they are, and we can now start to correlate those compounds with certain diseases. And what I would love to see, and probably won't happen until I'm on the wrong side of the grass, but what we want to have is an instrument that can give the physician diagnostically actionable information at the point of care. I don't know how it goes in Health Canada when you go see a physician for your annual checkup, but down here in the US, we currently have what I call the most expensive data entry clerks in the world. These are our primary care physicians. You go in, he chats you up for about 5 minutes. He's got your chart. He makes a few notes on the chart, and then he orders a certain set of tests. And then he lets you know that, oh, we'll get the results back in about 2 weeks. And if there's anything amiss, I will let you know. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we had a way of gathering information about your body's metabolism and understanding what's happening so that when you show up, his chat isn't to go find out who you are and get some information, but his chat is based upon what information we have right now.
Review your
You
data.
shouldn't be here. You're so healthy. We don't have to do anything. Oh, but by the way, go lose 5 pounds because you're better off being thinner than where you are right now. But getting that type of activity in place. And we know that if you look at what's on the skin, you look at what is in the urine, you look at what comes out of your breath, are 3 areas where we can get information non-invasively about what is going on in the body. Why don't we do it now? Because we don't know enough yet.
Right.
We're just getting instruments that can get the sensitivity, the specificity, and the speed to start to be able to use for essentially screening applications at the point of care. And there's some really interesting stories on this. And the one that I find most interesting is in the United Kingdom, up in Scotland, there was a nurse who probably should have been a chef. She had a fantastic sense of smell, and she told the doctors that she could smell patients with Parkinson's. Rather than dismissing her as being just one more wacky nurse, they actually gave her a test. They took T-shirts from 10 healthy patients and T-shirts from 10 patients that had Parkinson's and gave it to her and asked her to identify which T-shirts came from which patients. She correctly identified 11 of the 10 patients who had Parkinson's.
No way. Wow.
Now, the one that she supposedly misidentified 6 months later was diagnosed with having Parkinson's.
No kidding. Wow.
Now, they led them to be very curious. And so an investigation started to figure out what is going on. And what they found is that patients with Parkinson's have a slightly different sebum. And that different mixture of those skin compounds results in a slightly different smell.
So it can be that subtle.
It's that subtle. And the University of Manchester has brought out a test that by wiping the skin and doing some things along there, they can use this to help identify whether a patient has Parkinson's or not. That's the good news. The bad news is we don't know how to treat Parkinson's yet.
Right.
But the point I'm making in all of this is the sense of smell on these compounds that our body puts out from the metabolism, as we are able to analyze them, will be able to give us diagnostically actionable information. We know, for example, that dogs can be trained to smell men's urine and identify prostate cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've heard this before. Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Medical detection dogs in the UK trains them to do that with about an 85% sensitivity. So there is something in the pattern of compounds that are coming out that we can probably correlate. Now, do we have instruments that can detect this and get it all? I don't know, because when we look at what Mother Nature does in terms of odors and ability to identify odors, she engineers some really amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
We know that a moth can detect the pheromones of a female from over a mile away.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're talking about getting a compound probably that's this dispersal of that pheromone is down in the parts per quintillion, some ridiculously low number.
Right.
But that moth can follow that scent gradient to the female.
Mm-hmm.
What the dog is smelling, we don't know yet. To put in my local joke on that, Dr. Doolittle died, and nobody's been able to talk to the animals since then. But
Good
it
one.
is something that's relevant to start to study
Yeah,
to see if we can
absolutely.
identify and screen for prostate cancer and use that. Now, how relevant that's going to be for healthcare, I don't know, because by the time you're about 70 years old, most men have some sort of low form of prostate cancer.
Right.
And the real question is do you have an aggressive form of prostate cancer, or are you going to be hit by a bus before the prostate cancer kills you?
Right.
And
So
that
really,
is one.
this is early analysis or early preventive
It's early
measures.
preventive,
Yeah.
and to a certain extent, there are many cancers in which we overly intervene because they are slow growth cancers
Right.
that you the cost of the healthcare system exceeds the value you get from intervening in it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we're really trying to be able to do. And our focus is to start on breast cancer for a very simple reason.
Mm-hmm.
It is the most common cancer in women today.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 12 women are going to get breast cancer in their lifetime. The disease is affecting younger women, and women are the center of the family. They're the center of the village. They're the center of the community. To have a healthy community, you have to have healthy women. And we need to make certain that these women get diagnosed and get treated when it is early stage, such that we can actually treat that, cure them, give them an extended life.
Yeah, because isn't it true that the earliest it's breast cancer is one of the cancers that the earlier the stage it's discovered, the higher
Oh,
the survival
the
rate.
two things go. The cure rate and the survival rate goes very high,
Yeah.
and the cost of treatment goes down. If you get breast cancer in the US and diagnosed at stage 1 or stage 2, it's going to be somewhere on the order of about $20,000 to treat it.
Right.
Then if you go to stage 3, it's going to be 125,000 or greater. And then you're at stage 1, you have close to about a 99% cure rate. At stage 2, you've got about a 90% cure rate, and you've got a 95% 5-year survival rates. Those are numbers that come off the top of my head, so people
Right.
can go check them. But
Sure.
that's what you're trying to get to, is this type of thing. So it is very important to be able to get it early. From the woman's perspective, it can be a lumpectomy. It can be a number of different processes that
Mm-hmm.
are very low in very non-invasive or low invasive, as opposed to at stage 3, where you're going to have a big tumor, you're going to be taking
Mm-hmm.
lymph nodes away and everything else, and
So
you're going to
conceive
leave her with some permanent injury,
right.
even if she survives.
Sure. So conceivably, you've got this device as a way to kind of early screen somebody to say, "Oh, this we're getting indications that you may be at risk of breast cancer," which would then say trigger that individual to go to the next step,
And
speak
that
to
is
their doctor,
exactly what it is,
and go
because
down the line. Yeah.
one of the things we can do is say to the woman, the pattern of these trace gases in your breath is consistent with the pattern that is present in women who have breast cancer. But we can't go beyond that because we
No.
can't tell you where it is.
No.
You
It's
need to
as
get another test to localize it.
it's like a machine that's sitting in the drugstore where you go down and get your blood pressure test. The same idea, just and have a
Yeah,
breath
yeah,
test,
exactly.
and yeah,
You
it
just
could,
go in, give us a breath sample.
yeah,
We analyze the breath sample. Here you go. There's a lot of learning curve to get there.
sure. I can see where it's going though.
Yeah. And the other thing that comes in there is let's take the next step. Supposing we take a urine sample as well. Because right now, what do you do with the urine when you go in on your basic physical? They can take a sample of urine, they spin it down, and they look for seeing proteins and say, oh, your kidneys aren't failing you, good. But there's a lot of information in there.
Hmm.
Now, how much of it is present in the volatile organic compounds that can be taken through gas chromatography versus how much of it would be in some of the heavier stuff that you would get through an HPLC and give you some indication as to what the diseases that you have are, don't know. But the gas chromatography is something that can be done very rapidly at the point of care. And if you do that with a urine sample, you would just do a headspace analysis. Just let it sit in a vial, take the air off that, let it reach equilibrium, and analyze it at the same time. And one of the interesting things that comes out in looking at that is there's a paper by Dr. Herman Safar from Ben Gurion University of the Negev that by analyzing both breath and urine for women, he was able to establish that he had a 90% positive predictive value for breast cancer.
Really? Wow.
Now, small study, so it could have been a vampire correlation, could have been all sorts of things go in the way of what that study means, and it needs to be replicated in a much larger study
Mm-hmm.
to validate that says this makes a lot of sense. So let's ask the next question that obviously comes along in it is, so if this is so positive, why isn't it going anywhere?
Yeah.
Why isn't it in place?
That was my next question. How did you know?
Gee, I'm what was that guy's name? Karnak the Magnificent? And you will get it, but a lot of your audience is
Good
going to
old
not get
Johnny
that because
Carson.
that is
Yeah.
so old. But medicine is a very conservative process. First, do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
We have standards of care. We want to have large amounts of data to establish that this standard of care isn't going to change anything. So if we take the US, for example, we the median stage of diagnosis of breast cancer in this country is stage 2. About 65% of all of the women follow the screening recommendations of the FDA. So from that perspective, we've gone from stage 3, getting it down to stage 2. So from the FDA's perspective, speaking for them, they're doing a good job of starting to manage this disease and get it under control. And if we turned around and said, oh, we've got this great new screening technology along here, the last thing they want to do is see women migrate away from that to something that they don't have a large statistical database with to validate that it's not going to change the results, the outcome in there. They don't want to see us going from, oh, we're detecting everything at stage 2 to, oh, now we've got it's about stage 2.5 because we've got this process going along in there. So they're going to want large amounts of data. That makes perfectly good sense. So where does this have the initial thing to get started? You want to identify countries that have breast cancer, but don't have the wealth to invest in and maintain an imaging screening infrastructure
Right.
to drive the business. If you go to a country like Mexico, for example, then 70% of all breast cancer cases in Mexico are diagnosed at stage 3.
Is that right?
That tells you right away that they don't have adequate screening infrastructure.
Right.
Now, if you can turn around and say, well, we've got a test along here that we can do this, and we can eliminate a large portion of those women that show up negative on our breath test, and you can use your screening infrastructure now for those women that appear to be positive, you're using those resources
Right.
far more efficiently than you can right now.
And that's something that could be mobilized. It's not something you have to have bricks and mortar. It's something you can do on a vehicle that, is a mobile unit.
And you can do mobile mammograms along there as well. But one of the nice things about breath is there's no nudity at all. There's just exhale. We analyze yours one. You can put it into a Toyota van and go around because you don't have to have the radiation. You don't have to have the power source. You don't have to have anything like that. So it allows you to have the potential to go do large scale mobile screenings in places very efficiently.
Yeah.
And then identify
even rural, remote, where they don't have access to as many facilities as you could imagine. But yeah.
And since the result is virtually in real time, because it takes the longest part of the test with this is it's about 2.5 minutes to get the breath sample into the instrument. The analysis time on it takes a minute.
Wow.
So at the end of that, you're going to have a screen that is going to basically give you a probability of having breast cancer. So You screen through this village and you're able to go and say, okay, there are only 2 women. And now you can go ahead and start making arrangements for them to go into a city center or something to go get the
Right.
mammogram
Mm-hmm.
done right at the point of care.
Mm-hmm.
So that is sort of the where this, I believe, has its initial activity along there, and you can validate it. And there's a lot to be learned. I mean, you think about, you just ran up a flight of stairs. How long from riding up that flight of stairs before your breath starts to be back into the normal steady state
Yeah.
that you can get these compounds out? These are all questions that you need to get answered. And these are all questions that the FDA or Health Canada would ask along there. But you want to have answers because we're wealthy countries, and wealthy countries can invest in the healthcare system, but lower middle income countries can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it is in those lower middle income countries where the rate of increase in breast cancer is increasing. The rate of increase in breast cancer in Mexico is expected to double over the next 15 years.
Is that right? Wow.
I just saw a paper in El Salvador. Breast cancer is very low, but it's growing at 2.5% per annum. So the
Wow.
incidence is growing fairly rapidly.
Yeah, that's fast.
So this is taking place pretty much around the world. And if anybody can explain that increase and why it's occurring, you might get a Nobel Prize in medicine.
Hmm. So, where are you at now? What's the next step? Where?
So
How
right
far have
now
you got to
we
go?
are looking at conducting a series of clinical trials in Mexico
Hmm.
to validate that in Mexico to get established and approved for screening in that country. And we look at Mexico being a very good place to do this because there's a clear and present need. And to put it onto the business side of things, which will get me in trouble maybe, but one of my business school profs said one time, you never want to get into a fight with Muhammad Ali. You may win, but you are definitely going to get hurt. And if you look at the screening population in the US, we'll take that as a market we understand,
Mm-hmm.
it's about $4 billion a year.
Hmm.
And it has incumbent service providers in there. And they've got investments in assets, they've got investments in screening in people and everything else. And yet, I've never met a woman who's looking forward to her next mammogram. So, if there is a screening tool out there that is both faster, lower cost, no nudity, and painless, we would expect that there would be a high migration across there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
here is Muhammad Ali, which has a very large business. They're doing a very good job of it. I'm not going to criticize anything they're doing
Sure.
because they're doing an excellent job. But from a business perspective, they could see that they would get a large migration of their customers to a different solution. And
Yeah.
where we see this working, and this is where we don't want to have that happen, where we see this potentially working, but we need to get studies done to validate this, that by combining breath with a mammogram, do we reduce the number of false negatives
Hmm.
in that mammogram?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we turn around and say you've got a sensitivity of 85%, what we're really saying is out of every 100 cases of cancer, you're missing 15.
Right.
Now, if we can get that to where the sensitivity is 90%, well, we're only missing 10. That's pretty amazing if we can get there.
Yeah. Hey, I was thinking, is this, this is something that would be more or less accepted or embraced by the preventative health, by preventative disease medicine or preventative health, where they're looking for ways and the mentality of certain people sort of look at their lives and approach their health in a preventative way. So I
Yes,
would imagine this would be a very early adoptive community to say, oh yeah, I would pay for that. I
but we
would, I
still
would,
have to get Health Canada and we still have to get the FDA to turn around and give it the papal seal.
right. So they still need to approve it.
And we were making medical claims, they need to approve it.
Right.
Now, some of the interesting stuff, we did some studies over in China. And looking at lung cancer, we have about a 75% sensitivity, but about a 94% specificity. So when
Hmm.
we say you've got lung cancer, better start making out your will and all the rest of that.
Right. It's late.
And we don't know what else. We do know that from other people's studies that you can identify gastric cancer, you can identify liver disease. In there, you not necessarily be able to go between fatty liver disease and other forms of hepatitis and liver cancer, but you can
Hmm.
identify that through the breath. There are all of these things that are coming along. There are some hints that you may be able to get some soft tissue carcinomas like pancreatic cancer.
Hmm.
But because pancreatic cancer has about 6 different forms, whether it's going to be robust, how large a population you need to have
Right.
to get that and tease out whether there's the same metabolic effect or different metabolic effects that go in there. So ideally, what we would love to be able to do is find people who understand the metabolism. And if I use a model, the H. pylori test, in which if you're looking to see whether you have a H. pylori infection for your ulcers, what do? They sit down, they take a sample of your breath, and they look at the CO2 ratio, and then they give you some urease and you drink it. And 15 minutes later, they go and look at the CO2 ratio in your breath. And what urease does is it activates the bacteria, and one of their byproducts is to produce more CO in that process. So when I see that, then I can turn around and say, okay, fine, you have an H. pylori infection because I gave you something, it induced this type of response, and I know precisely what it is.
Hmm.
Now, one of the interesting things would be, and this is where I end up on the wrong side of the grass, and you probably end up on the wrong side of the grass by the time, but if we can come up with a mechanism whereby I give you something to ingest and it changes and identifies a certain metabolic reaction that is highly correlated with the presence of that
Oh, I
cancer,
see. Right.
then, and we can identify that, then we have a test that becomes far more accurate because right
Right.
now we're just looking at a series of compounds and seeing how correlated they are. What
Right.
you'd want to do is, okay, I've got this thing that's correlated like this. That's sort of positive. Now let me give you this. And okay, now this particular compound spikes. Okay. And we know that that particular compound spikes because I gave you this, which does that in your body. And that would be ideal if you can get there. But
Right.
there will be that requires some scheduled inventions and some people who are highly knowledgeable about the biology and the metabolism. And then you start running into questions about, well, what's the genotype and how does that work? Because we know that
Right.
there are, depending upon your inheritance, you may not metabolize ibuprofen the same way somebody else does.
Right.
And ibuprofen can be hazardous to your health,
Right.
where for 99.9% of the people, it doesn't matter at all.
Right.
Or the more one that's more common is essentially in the Asian population, they metabolize alcohol differently. So they get a flushed face very
Oh, I
quickly.
see. Right.
So that so there's a different metabolic process. So we don't know enough about that
Interesting.
either to
Wow.
get there.
So now you need data. So that's the goal right now.
We
You're
we need to
collecting
get a
data.
lot of data to do
Yeah.
this. And once we get the data, then we go back and we want to get approvals first in Mexico so we can start to commercialize this, so we can start
Yeah.
getting revenues. And then we come back into the wealthy countries and say, here's what we're doing.
Right.
Here's how we're doing that. And we work with the incumbents in here to introduce a solution
Huh.
that is better for everybody in the healthcare system because it's better for all of us to identify something at stage 1 than at stage 3.
Is it easier to get approved in underdeveloped nations?
Don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
They are going to want to see the same data.
Yeah. For
They are
sure.
going to
Yeah.
want to establish that you do have a process that does answer their question
Mm-hmm.
along there.
Right.
The question that comes up in these countries is if I'm the regulatory authority and I'm looking at the effect within the overall system, if my screening by if I'm at stage 3, I'm using Mexico as an example, and if all of you people from Mexico, I'm not insulting you or anything, but if my median stage of diagnosis of breast cancer is stage 3, and somebody comes in and says I can screen a large part of the population, and my sensitivity is only 80%, um, the net effect to the health population will be a lot better because we identify a lot of women who have uh, the disease, and we can then go treat that disease at a
Right.
stage 2.
Right.
We do have to be able to say we can detect this at stage 2 or stage 1 because anybody can detect breast cancer at stage
Stage
3.
3. Right. Very interesting. Wow. This is I didn't know. I didn't think I was gonna get all this. This is amazing. What a story. So you started this by telling us that you've been in the startup world for a long time. You're a bit of a startup junkie, apparently, right?
Well, I as I joke to people, and I actually, when I went to business school, one of my professors when we were first at orientation, and by the way, that's what little aside on my wife, just to give you a little bit of entertainment.
Sure.
I met my wife at business school. I sat right next to her, right at orientation. She sat there, and okay, she's at one of about 5 Chinese school girls that were in that class. So when we finally started dating, I turned to her and said, you know, I met you right at orientation. To which she said, I'll show you exactly how impressive I was. She looked at me and said, I don't remember. But then, to show how clever she was, she then turned around and said, but of course, you all looked alike to me.
That's
So
awesome. That's a good
it
story.
is. It's one of the cute stories I tell about her because it was really fantastic that she had that sense of wit.
That's good. Uh, so
So,
you
so
so
going
you
back
started.
and so
What is it you like about the startup? What attracts you to that sort of state of business?
the interesting part is how the problems you have to solve, and the potential impact you have on the world. So, examples of things that we got involved with that were intriguing. So, I started out, and as I said, one of the questions that a professor asked in business school was, "Why are you here?" And
Fair question.
a lot of people turned around and said, "Oh, I want to learn how to run a business." To which he said, "Well, you're going to spend about $100,000 and give up about $50,000 worth of income along here to go get this program. Take your $150,000, go buy a bodega in Harlem, and you will really learn how to run a business." Uh, I turned to him and said, "Well, I'm here because I want my union card.
Oh,
And if I graduate from one of these schools with an MBA, I essentially have my union card. I have said, I'm willing to forego this amount of money in order to establish that I can work with all of you people in this area." And that's one of the real values of the top end business schools is, hey, I fit within here. Here's my union card. But what got me going into early stage was this was back when we were first starting to get various types of applications of electronics into vertical applications. Whether An Wang had brought out his word processing software, there are a number of companies doing activities along there, and you were getting this whole transition away from electronics or from mechanical devices to electronic devices that
right.
solve problems. And that was very interesting and very exciting because there's a growth opportunity in there. There's multiple different ways of failing. There are lots of this that you can go out. So you get a vast set of experience in learning these things and trying to solve problems and make them happen. I remember meeting with one venture capitalist uh, who, when you go make the pitch to him, his first question is, "You went and look outside, you'll see all of our tombstones. Some of them have little black felt crepes along on the outside of them. They're ones that failed. So, I know you
Hmm.
may not succeed, but if you aren't going to succeed, at least find a new way of failing."
That's good advice too.
So that was what made it interesting. And the other part that makes it interesting is when you're in this startup space, the intelligence, the drive, the creativity. Yes, I begin to understand in this space what it must be like to be an artist, a musician in a session where you're creating jazz with people that are as creative, as exciting, and they feed off one another.
Mm,
And you're feeding off one another, and it's very energizing.
right. Very
So that's why
intoxicating. Yeah, I can see that for
you
sure.
get into early stage stuff to go see what the heck happens.
Right. So and you get into that. So and as you're the founder of Maggie's Breath, and I
Well,
think
my wife and I founded it.
together.
Yes, yeah, she was the one who basically said, "Here's." I had more understanding what the technology is. She was the one who said, "Here's the business, the model, and everything. This is what we're going to do, and here's why we're going to do this."
Right. And
So
you've been doing,
it
and
goes hand in.
you've been working on this company since when? You started
Well, we
in
started in 2016.
15, right?
We had to go. 2015 was when we founded, but getting it all going and everything, we started in 2016.
Hmm.
Okay, we get a certain ways along. We have to modify some equipment. We have to get things going. We get various things going. And then comes this stupid bit of crap called COVID.
Right. Of course.
And COVID puts paid to any clinical trials or anything else. You're just sitting there. So if you look at it from I look at it from the financial perspective, you're the jet that gets out to the end of the runway. You're ready to take off. They close the airport. All of the gates are closed there, so you can't go back to the gates.
Hmm.
But you still got to keep the APU running to keep the lights and the air conditioning and everything running. So we're sitting there just running our APU and not able to do anything. And our partner in Mexico, which was at that time ISTE, which the best way of looking at it from an American perspective is ISTE was a government employee's HMO. They were going to be a great launch customer because they ran about 20 hospitals and they had about 200 clinics, and they provided healthcare services to about 6 million people
Mm.
and their families. So you had all of these, and they had a desire to get better screening tools for breast cancer. But during COVID, the whole place got reorganized and it disappeared. So after we came out of COVID, it was let's go find a different site to go see if we can get clinical trials started. And we found Christus Muguerza in Monterey. But the challenge was now where do we go get all of the funding to get this thing done?
Mm.
Because the initial funding we got, we ran out of that funding. So half the time has been let's keep these things going, and half the time is going out, finding frogs, kissing frogs, hoping they turn into princes with long arms and deep pockets. And so that's been the process over this period. And during that period, my wife was diagnosed with the breast cancer.
Wow.
And I can say when that happened, complete focus on something entirely different. And
Oh
she ended
yes.
up passing away from that breast cancer.
Yeah. Takes the wind out of your sail, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it also changes this in a sense because instead of just being a business, it is now looking at it as a monument to her.
A legacy. 100%. Yep. And I love that you changed the name to Maggie's Breath.
Everybody will remember it.
100%. 100%. So today that's the focus is you have you found a partner now to help you've
No, we
found a
haven't
partner.
found all the partner yet. We're
Oh,
talking to
okay.
people all over about getting partners in to do this and get it going and re-energizing it.
Well,
We
let's
have,
hope someone's listening right now and they
I
are.
hope so. But what we have is we have some people that are interested in doing this down in El Salvador.
Hmm.
They've talked to me. We have a group that's very interested in possibly doing this over in India.
Hmm.
Again, that is the type of process that makes sense along here. That is exactly what we have to do. So this is the process that we have to go through.
Hmm.
And if people are very interested, I'd be quite willing to talk to them.
They can reach out to you on LinkedIn.
They can
Yes.
reach out to me on LinkedIn. They can go to
.com.
maggiesbreath.com. That's MAGGIEBRETH. Now, one other aside on her. Her father decided that he named her Maggie because you're growing up in Malay at the time, and the education system was English. So it's a name that people will recognize, because if you'd stayed with her Chinese name, Mi nobody'd know how to spell it. So she went with Maggie.
Right.
And so it's Maggie's Breath. And what I can say is, brilliant woman, first class honors from LSE, and went to Columbia for her MBA because her basic goal was, all of my friends over here have their MBAs and they're making partner. I'd better go get my MBA and I'll be making partner in Malaysia. And then she ended up marrying me.
Well, I'd say she won.
Well,
She got partner.
I certainly think I won.
She got partner. Well, you both got partner in that sense.
Yeah, and the sad part is that there is one of the things that I don't think we'd be able to do was be able to identify the type of cancer she had.
Right.
Because what we think why we get these compounds are that you have hard tumors, and the hard tumors elevate the pressure, and with that comes hydrogen peroxide, and the peroxide cleaves the lipids and starts making these alkane compounds and other compounds. Her particular type of cancer formed a mesh, a net. And as such, it was very hard to be diagnosed and let alone treated. And as we all learn, we play the hand God deals us.
Yeah, it's a tragic irony in this situation, but you're carrying her name. You're carrying her vision on in her honor and in her name. I think
Our goal is to make certain that every woman has the opportunity to be screened for this.
Yes.
And what we don't know is, once we have this large amount of data, that we can start to find other things that are out there. I can tell you, for example, that if I find mercaptan on your breath, you may have colorectal cancer.
Wow.
But is this a good screening tool for colorectal cancer? No. But going back to what I said at the beginning, if we've got a screening technology in place, that we have all of this, when I take your breath, I've got a lot of information about your metabolism.
Right.
And I'm quite certain that if I took your breath right now and went through it, I'd basically be able to say, go on your way. There's nothing much I can do for you.
Well, 300 years ago, when they took someone's blood, they didn't get much information. So
that's right.
It's another 300 years later, and now look what they can do once they take someone's blood and analyze it. So it doesn't surprise me that we can do the same with our breath or any other body fluids for that matter. It's like all the information, all the data is within us as to what's going on, but it takes intelligence and smart people, smart technology to bring it together so that we can actually do something with that information and make the world a better place and help people be healthier and live longer. And I just think what you're doing is incredible. I appreciate you so much for sharing your story with myself. I felt like I was the only one in the room, but there are going to be listeners here.
I'm looking around, and I think you are the only one in the room.
But when this goes live, there'll be other people in the room, and I really hope they appreciate your story. And I hope someone hears this who wants to help and wants to be part of your journey. And
well, let me make one other little pitch along here for anybody.
Sure.
Music Beats Cancer, which is a 501c3, is conducting fundraising for Maggie's Breath. And anybody can go to musicbeatscancer.org, click on their campaigns, enter Maggie's Breath, and they can make a donation. And one of the things that we are doing is we are, for anybody who makes a donation of $100 or more, we will give them a free breath screening for breast cancer. if and when we have approval by the FDA.
That's an amazing offer. That's great. I will make sure
We
that
we want to create
information.
awareness of this among the women's population as
Absolutely.
well.
That's
We
a
want,
great idea.
because for our own basic one, when women hear about this, they become our best lobby for
100%.
helping get
There are
approval by the
people
FDA.
already that would want to know. Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure that information is also on our.
Yeah, I will send you
so-
the QR code so they can go right to it.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Okay. Thank you again, Bill, and I really appreciate your sharing with us. And thanks for taking me up on being on this show.
Hey, I really enjoyed it. Great to let me talk for an hour and get an appreciative audience.
You got it. Such a deeply rooted vision and passion for what he's doing, creating that legacy for Maggie. And those are the kind of personal experiences that really drive passion and purpose for people and motivate so many healthcare innovations. So, man, I wish him all the luck in his data collection and hoping that he gets that FDA approval. So if you're interested in that, you should reach out to Bill. He's on LinkedIn, Bill Wittmeyer, or you can go to maggiesbreath.com. This is an incredibly important topic, around early detection and prevention. Breast cancer is increasingly affecting younger and younger women, and there has never been more of a need for non-invasive screening methods. And, that's where it's at. If you want to help raise funds for this cause, you can go to musicbeatscancer.org, and it's conducting fundraising for Maggie. And for every $100 or more that are donated towards the cause, they will get a free screening for breast cancer once it's approved by the FDA. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy Enterprise, and please stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.